האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening, Dobra V'yetcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Beshalach. We are going to do section 21, Os Chaf Aleph. Lot of preparatory material and explanatory material that needs to go along with this section. All worth it, all fascinating, all amazing. But let's start with a pasuk from the Parsha. This is, again, Parshas Beshalach, very much at the end of the Parsha, Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Yud Daled. After Amalek, the evil, wicked nation of Amalek, attacks the Jewish people, and Hashem and Moshe sends Yehoshua to fight against them, and Yehoshua is able to successfully battle against Amalek. Right after that, the pasuk says, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Kisov zos, write this zikaron basefer as a memorial in the book. V'sim be'ozne Yehoshua, and place it in the ears of Yehoshua. Ki macho emche es zecher Amalek, because I will surely erase the memory of Amalek. Mitachas hashamayim, from under the heavens. So we see clearly in this pasuk that what happened between Amalek and them attacking the Jewish people and Yehoshua taking soldiers to go fight them wasn't just something, a historic event, because Hashem said to Moshe, tell Yehoshua, let Yehoshua know that I'm going to completely wipe out Amalek in the future, and their memory will be wiped out from mitachas hashamayim, from under the heavens. So now we're going to move from that to a pasuk or an episode actually in Sefer Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tesvav, in which Shmuel Hanavi, this is many years later, after Moshe and Yehoshua battled against Amalek, Shaul has been appointed the first king. This is the famous King Saul, the first king over the Jewish people. And Shmuel comes with the prophet Samuel comes with a message from Hashem. So Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tesvav, Pasuk Gimel. Atah, now, lech v'hikisa es Amalek. Shmuel tells Shaul the message from Hashem is to go and to strike Amalek. V'hacharamtem es kol asher lo, and destroy everything that belongs to the nation of Amalek. V'lo sachmol alav, and do not take any pity on it, on this nation of Amalek. Vehemato meish ad isha, you must kill them from man to woman, the men and the women. Me'olel ve'ad yonek, from the children to even the ones who are nursing. Mishor ve'ad seh, from the oxen to the sheep. Me'gamal ve'ad chamor, from the camels to the donkeys. Completely wipe out the nation of Amalek. And then as we read further there in Shmuel Aleph, it turns out that Shaul with an army defeats Amalek, but he allows the king Agag to live, and the people allow some of the choicest of the animals to not be put to death. And when Shmuel shows up, he's very angry, and he tells Shaul, because you didn't follow the commandments of Hashem exactly and precisely in reference to wiping out Amalek, all the people and all the animals, including the king and including the best animals, because you didn't do that, the kingship is going to be torn away from you and given to someone else. And of that, of course, turned out to be David HaMelech, King David, as opposed to the line of the kingship staying in with Shaul and his family. So that's a little bit of an introduction to this piece, because as we're going to see in a moment, the Zera Shimshon opens with a discussion of why Shaul did not wipe out Amalek completely. Why did he take pity and not completely destroy them, as was the command in the Torah that we saw at the end of our Parsha? and also was the explicit command that Shaul received from Hashem through the prophet Shmuel, from Shmuel Hanavi. As we get into this very first few lines, we're going to see that we also need to talk about something called the mitzvah of Egla Arufa, the decapitated calf, a very unusual and fascinating mitzvah in the Torah, and we'll see how that connects to everything momentarily. Let us begin. Parshas Beshalach, Os Chaf Aleph, section 21. Yoma Perik Beis, in the Gemara Meseches Yoma in the second chapter. It quotes a phrase from the pasuk we just looked at regarding Shaul's battle against Amalek, and it says, Vayorev banachal, and he fought in the valley. Actually, we didn't read that pasuk. That was coming up right after we stopped reading, but the pasuk tells us that after Shmuel gave Shaul the command to go wipe out Amalek, it says, Vayorev banachal, Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, gathered a great army, and he went to fight against Amalek in the valley. Vayorev banachal, and he fought in the valley. Amar Rebbe Mani. Rebbe Mani says in the Gemara something very different. Al izke nachal. When it says that Shaul fought in the valley, it doesn't just mean literally he fought Amalek in the valley, but he fought about the messages or the issues of the valley. What does that mean? What was Shaul talking about or arguing about with something having to do with a valley? At the time when Hashem said to Shaul, Lech v'hikisa es Amalek, go and strike Amalek, that's the pasuk that we read. So when Hashem sent that message through Shmuel to Shaul HaMelech, go and strike and attack Amalek, Omar, Shaul said, Uma im bishvil nefesh achas. What about the fact that because of one soul, one life, Amra Torah, the Torah says, Haviu egla arufa banachal, bring a decapitated calf in the valley. Kol haneshamos halolu al achas kama v'kama. All of these souls of Amalek, if I wipe them out, how much more so will I have to bring atonement? We're going to explain all of this soon. And now this is we're continuing with what the Gemara says Shaul said when he was told to completely wipe out Amalek, all of the people and all of the animals. Im Adam chata, if the people of Amalek sinned, behema machata, the animals of Amalek, what sin did they commit? Why am I being commanded to wipe out all the animals of Amalek? Im gedolim chatu, if the adults of Amalek sinned, ketanim machatu, what did the children do wrong? So according to the Gemara, Shaul questioned this command to completely wipe out Amalek, all people, men, women, and children, and all animals. And he said, I don't understand why I'm wiping all these people out. Miyad yotzes, and all of these animals. Miyad yotzes baskol. Immediately a heavenly voice rang out, ve'omra lo, and said to him, Al tehi tzadik harbe. The heavenly voice, according to this Talmudic passage, quoted from a pasuk from Sefer Koheles, from Ecclesiastes, and the pasuk says, do not be overly righteous. So a heavenly voice said to Shaul, you're trying to make the case that you shouldn't listen. Somehow you should not listen and follow the command of Hashem because it doesn't seem moral or ethical or appropriate. Don't be such a great tzaddik. Listen to what Hashem tells you. And at a later time, when Shaul said to his advisor Doeg, Sov ata ufega b'kohanim, circle around and strike down the Kohanim, and we'll explain this reference also. Amrolo, then the heavenly voice said to him, Al tirsha harbe, don't be overly wicked. Ad kan, until here is a quote from the Gemara and Maseches Yoma. So let's pause because obviously there's a lot to explain. We need to understand exactly what the Gemara is referring to in the first episode when Shaul questioned the command to wipe out all of the Amalek nation and all of the animals. He had a question. And later when Shaul told his advisor to kill a whole group of Kohanim, then the heavenly voice said, don't be so wicked. You're doing something that's exceedingly wicked. So we're going to talk about both of those episodes right now. So the first episode has to do with Egla Arufa. If we were to look in Parshas Shoftim, in Sefer Devarim, in the Parsha Shoftim, we would find that a very unusual mitzvah is given. And here comes a thumbnail sketch of that mitzvah. If a corpse is found, okay, a corpse, someone has been murdered and the body is found, the Torah tells us to measure from that corpse, from that cadaver, to the closest city. And then we are to bring the Zekanim, the elders of that city, to a valley, a nachal, and specifically a valley that hasn't been plowed or worked, a valley that is very rough terrain and can't be used for planting and plowing. And we should bring, in addition to the elders, we should bring a calf and an egel, a calf. And then we should decapitate the calf in a very specific type of ceremony. And then the Zekanim, the elders from the closest town, the town closest to the dead body, then make statements saying that they were not responsible and that they don't know who murdered this person, and that they did not have any connection to, that they bear no responsibility for what happened to this poor soul who was murdered. That's the mitzvah of Egla Arufa, of the decapitated calf. So Shaul refers to that mitzvah, and he says, Hashem, you're telling me, or Shmuel, you're telling me Hashem wants me to totally destroy all of the people of Amalek, men, women, and children, and all of the animals. I see in the Torah that if one person is killed and we don't know who killed the one person, we have a whole ceremony to bring the elders and involve them, to bring a calf and to kill it as a type of atonement ceremony. If all of that is done because one person was killed when we don't know what the circumstances are, how am I being told to completely destroy an entire nation of men, women, and children and all of the animals? And Shaul goes on to say, it's one thing to kill adults. Why am I killing the children? What did they do wrong? It's one thing to kill human beings, but why am I killing animals? What did the animals possibly do wrong? So that's the first part of the Gemara in Maseches Yoma, in which Shaul HaMelech apparently uses the mitzvah of Egla Arufa. Again, that's the ceremony when the body is found that's mentioned in Parsha Shoftim and Sefer Devarim. Shaul HaMelech uses that mitzvah to kind of argue and question his command that he received to totally wipe out Amalek. So that's part one. Part two is when the tables are turned, and this is later in Sefer Shmuel. Shaul HaMelech is extremely suspicious of David. David at this point, David had started off as one of Shaul's soldiers and one of his servants, and David would play music for Shaul to relax him, and had a close special relationship with Shaul's son, Yonasan. But as time passed, Shaul became extremely suspicious of David, and the episode is told to us in Navi and Sefer Shmuel that David was on the run, and he came to Nov Ir Kohanim. He came to a city called Nov, which was a city where the Kohanim lived, and he went to the head of the town. He went to a man named Achimelech, and he said to him, Shaul, the king, has sent me on a special mission. Please, and I have some men with me, a small group. Please give us food, provisions. and weapons and help us so I can fulfill a mission for Shaul the king. Well, that was a made-up story, but the Kohanim who lived there, and Achimelech who lived there, wanted to help out, and they believed what David said to them. David was known as a very righteous person who was close to the king, and so they gave him provisions for him and his men, and they gave him weapons, and they gave him the sword of Goliath, the great sword of the giant Goliath that had been stored there in that city. And they gave him all these things. Later on, and David went on his way and escaped from Shaul. Later on, when Shaul found out what happened, he told his advisor Doeg, who had been present at the time and had brought the tale back to Shaul, kill all of these Kohanim. And Doeg proceeded to do so. He killed these Kohanim and he wiped out the city of Nov, men, women, children, and animals. And that's when the heavenly voice came out, and instead of saying, as it did the first time, don't be overly righteous, this time it said, don't be overly wicked. So the two stories are kind of they're bookends. In one episode, Shaul is very worried about the responsibility of wiping out Amalek and killing all the men, women, and children. And in the case of Nov, he went to the opposite extreme and wiped out an entire town of innocent men, women, and children and their animals. Now let's go back to the Zera Shimshon. So that's what the Gemara in Yoma is talking about, that the Zera Shimshon just described for us. Back to the end of the first paragraph. Ve'af al gav de lo ksiv bakra, even though it's not written in the pasuk shechomal al haketanim, that Shaul took pity on the children of Amalek and didn't kill them. It doesn't actually say that in the psukim. Kvar teretz Maharsha, the Talmudic commentary Maharsha, has already answered this question. The kevan shechomal al agag, since we see explicitly in the text that Shaul took pity on Agag, the king of Amalek, and did not kill him, mistoma chomal nami al haketanim, it only makes sense that Shaul took pity on the children, who are much less blameworthy than the king, than Agag himself. So that brings us to the next paragraph. Aval od hikshu hameforshim, but the commentaries have another question. Dema kal v'chomer huzeh. What kind of logical reasoning, a kal v'chomer, what kind of logical reasoning was this? Halo din egla arufa lo ne'amar ela b'Yisrael. The law of the calf that gets decapitated was only said about Jews when a Jewish person's body was found. Ve'echasa kal v'chomer al zera Amalek. How did Shaul try to apply a kal v'chomer reasoning, which we'll explain in a moment, to Amalek, to the children of Amalek, to the nation of Amalek? V'od kashelon. And there's another question. Well, let's hold the other question for a moment. The first question is, Shaul HaMelech's reasoning seems extremely faulty, because he said, if when one Jewish body is found, they do this whole ceremony of the Egla Arufa, the decapitated calf, how am I supposed to wipe out an entire nation of Amalek and not expect to be forced to bring, to have to do a tremendous amount of sacrifices and work to become forgiven for that? So the Zera Shimshon says Shaul appears to be mixing apples and oranges. Shaul was talking about the ceremony of Egla Arufa, which had to do when a Jewish body was found. And he was asking a question about how can he then go and wipe out the nation of Amalek. Well, the nation of Amalek and the way the Torah views the nation of Amalek and the laws regarding Amalek and the way the Torah views the Jewish people are as far apart as they could possibly be. They're complete opposites. So why is Shaul comparing them and trying to learn from one to another and apply logical reasoning in the way that he did, to say, if it's so terrible for one Jewish body to be found, how can I wipe out the whole nation of Amalek? Well, because there's a mitzvah in the Torah, right in our Parsha of Beshalach, to wipe out the nation of Amalek. So there doesn't seem to be any reason for Shaul to have made the comparison that he made. Next question, bottom of the first column. The ode kashalon, and there's another question that we have. Demat sorech lomar egla arufa banachal. Why did it say the decapitated calf in the valley? Aloha yadai lomar. It would have been enough to say uma im bishvil nefesh achas. What about, this is how the Zera Shimshon is saying, this is what the Gemara and Yoma could have said. What about the case where there's one person, one life lost? Amra Torah, the Torah says, hey, via egla, to bring a calf. V'sulo, that's all it had. It didn't have to say any more than that. The Gemara didn't have to say, bring a decapitated calf in the valley. All it had to say was bring a calf, and we would all know it's talking about the famous unusual mitzvah of egla arufa. V'afim rotza lefarish v'lomar egla arufa. And even if the Gemara wanted to be a little more specific and not just say bring an egla, bring a calf, but bring an egla arufa, bring the decapitated calf, halo milas banachal, the word in the valley, miyuseras legamre, is completely superfluous. There's certainly no reason to say egla arufa banachal. That's when we talk about this mitzvah, we talk about the mitzvah of egla arufa. You never hear anyone say, or it's not written egla arufa banachal, the decapitated calf that's brought in a valley. It's true, it's brought to a valley, that's part of the mitzvah, but there must be some reason why Shaul HaMelech is being quoted as having gone out of his way, apparently, to not just say egla, but to say egla arufa, not just say egla arufa, but egla arufa banachal, the calf that is decapitated in the valley. Why is he quoted as going to into such detail? So two questions here that the Zera Shimshon will begin to develop answers for. Next paragraph. V'yuvan b'mai di'amrim b'perek testisota. This can be understood with what Chazal say in the 9th chapter of the Talmudic tractate of Maseches Sota. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul, Rabbi Yochanan the son of Shaul said, Mipnei ma amra Torah hevia egla banachal. Why did the Torah say to bring a calf down into this valley for the ceremony that we talked about, that we described before? Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said, Yavo mi shelo asa peiros, bring something that has not been able to bear fruit, meaning a calf. Bring a young calf. A young calf is still a child itself. It's not an adult. It hasn't been able to bring babies into the world. It's not an adult cow or an adult bull. So bring this young calf that has not had a chance to create its own fruit, its own offspring, v'ye'aref b'makom, and have it be decapitated in a place she'eno oseperos, that also doesn't produce fruit. We said that the Nachal, the type of valley where the ceremony was done, was a rough terrain, barren valley, not a place where people could plant things and things could grow, but rather the type of Nachal where nothing grows and nothing can be planted. So bring the calf that hasn't yet been able to bring offspring into the world, bring it down to a valley where nothing grows or can grow. Uperos v'yechaper, and in this ceremony we're going to bring atonement al mi shelohi nichuhu, for the murder of someone who is not allowed la'asos peros, to bring fruit, to bring fruit into the world, meaning the murder victim. The murder victim was struck down and killed before he could bring fruit in the world. Upeiros, what do we mean? Fruit? Hainu masim tovim. These are good actions. This person who was killed had a lifetime ahead of him or her of doing mitzvos and good deeds, but they were cut down and they were murdered before they could do that. Kedemasik hasam, as the Gemara over there concludes. That's what it's talking about when it talks about peiros. It means fruit, means masim tovim, good deeds. Uperish Iyon Yaakov, and the commentator Iyon Yaakov explains, the hakusha mipnei ma amra Torah hevia egla benachal. In the question when Shaul asks, why did when the Gemara asked a moment ago, when the Gemara asked why did the Torah say bring an egla arufa benachal, hainu lefi de'isa b'targum yonasan. This is going along with what it states in the Aramaic translation called Targum Yonasan. Umin yad, immediately nafkin nechil de moranin. Immediately when we kill the calf in the ceremony of the egla rufa, a whole stream of worms comes, migo eglosa, out of the body of the calf. Nafkin ve'ozlin, they come out and they go ad asra de kitola, until the place where the murderer is. So the Targum Yonasan adds to this already highly unusual story and mitzvah of the egla rufa, of the decapitated cow going into the valley and with the elders and killing the cow there, adds to it and says this is actually a way to find the murderer, because when we kill the calf in the proper way and we do the ceremony in the proper way, worms will come out of the body of the calf and they will go and it might take some time, but they will find their way to the house of the murderer and will be able to identify our suspect. Next paragraph. According to this idea that the worms are going to come out and lead us to the perpetrator, Yoser Tov Haya, it would have been better, Likach Para Gedola, to take a full-grown cow, Velo Egla Bashanasa, and not a calf that's only 1 year old, which is what the Torah says, for this ceremony. She'ein Harbe Toloim Yotzim Migufa. Not that many worms come out of the small body of a 1 year old calf. So we should have used an adult cow. V'chein benachal, and so too with this valley, shehu, that it is, top of the next page on the right. Kosher, we say it is a hard valley, means nothing can grow there. Einat toloim rochashim, worms cannot swarm there, kemo be'eretz lacha, as they could if it was wetland, if it was a swamp or moist land, as opposed to a dry, barren valley. Shenisracha nevelo miyad, in a wet place, the dead body of the animal would rot miyad, immediately. V'rochashim harbe toloim, and many worms would swarm out of it and have an easy time moving, which is what we should want. Lachein misaretz, and therefore the Gemara answered, Yavo mishalo wasaperos v'chule, the thing that didn't bring fruit should come or be brought to the place that doesn't bear fruit, and together we'll do a ceremony in which we bring atonement for the person who was murdered before he or she could bear fruit. Next paragraph. Umikan nira, from here it would seem, she'af al pisha godol ha'ovon shel shvichas damim, even though it's obvious that the sin of murder is one of the great cardinal sins, shahari ksiv, and we see this explicitly stated in a pasuk, v'lo aretz lo yichupar ladam, the land where a person is murdered cannot receive atonement, asher shupach ba, where the blood was spilled there, ki im bedam shovcho, unless we also spilled the blood of the murderer, the one who spilled the original blood. So the Torah makes it clear that murder is such a serious sin that justice can only be done, and kapara, atonement, can only be attained when we have a court system and the courts catch the murderer and put him to death. Im kol zeh, with all of this emphasis on how terrible murder is and how true justice for murder can only be found through capital punishment, yoser kosher hefsid, we're being told that in a certain way there's a greater law, shelohi nichuhu lasos peros, not just that a person was killed, but that the person was killed before he or she was able to really accomplish things and do masim tov and do mitzvos in this world. She'av shetis akev ha-mitzvah shel va'ato tivayr hadam hanakim b'kirbecha, even though our ceremony of Egla Arufa is going to delay fulfilling the verse that says, quickly find and eliminate and bring justice for the blood, the innocent blood that was spilled, even though we're told that we have to move as quickly as possible to find the murderer and to bring justice and by executing the murderer, even though that's true. Here we're told to hold that process up. Lefishi egla ve'ena para, because we're using a calf in the egla arufa ceremony and not a full-grown cow. Lefishi banachal, and we're also bringing it to a dry valley. Ve'ena b'makam ofarlach, and we're not bringing the animal to a place that has wet dirt, in which case the worms could move much more freely. We call makam leka kapeda. Nonetheless, we see that even though the ceremony of egla arufa is designed in such a way that it will take more time to find out who the murderer is, nonetheless, that's what we do. Why? Because in front of Hashem, the sin of murder that's being committed is more serious. Hashem wants us to see that it's more serious. That this person who they killed, the victim of the murderer, wasn't allowed to do masim tovim, wasn't allowed to be fruitful in this world by doing good deeds and mitzvos. And that, in a certain way, makes the action of killing the person even worse than the act of murder itself. So the Zera Shimshon is pointing out to us that the Torah's insistence upon using an egla, a calf, instead of a full-grown cow, and doing the ceremony in a dry, barren nachal as opposed to a wet, moist, verdant valley, is teaching us, is specifically teaching us that Hashem wants the lesson to be learned, even if it takes us longer to find the murderer. Nonetheless, Hashem wants us to realize how horrific it is that a person was murdered, and not just for the reason that obviously murder is a terrible sin, but that this person was murdered and this prevented him or her from osa peros, from being fruitful, from doing masim tobim, from doing mitzvos and good deeds in this world. There's a special emphasis being placed on that by the unique details of the egla arufa ceremony. Next paragraph. Uvazeh yuvain kavona shol. Now, through this, we can go back and understand what it is that Shaul was intending to say when he was asking his questions to Shmuel. Umayim bishvil nefesh achas amra Torah. If for one soul, meaning in the case of the egla arufa, the one on a body that we don't know how the person was killed, if for that, amra Torah heviu lefanai egla benachal, the Torah says, bring a calf into the valley. V'koshe, and we have a question, lama benachal, why into the valley? V'halo adarabba, is it not true that just the opposite, isn't it so that just the opposite should be said? Hoyenir alikach para, we should be taking a full-grown cow, not a calf, u'b'makom ofarlach, and we should be doing the ceremony in a wet place, kedei lemahir b'mitzvah atov v'tzivar ha'adam hanaki, in order for the worms to come out, lead us to the murderer, and then we can do justice and execute the murderer. Don't we want to do that as quickly as possible? But the fact that the ceremony sets things up in the slowest way of the different options, it's coming to teach us it's coming to teach us how serious it is viewed in front of Hashem when a person is murdered and isn't allowed to do the masim tovim, the good things that they were destined to do and could have done. This reason is relevant whether or not we're talking about Jews or whether or not we're talking about non-Jews. Even from non-Jews, it's certainly possible that good things, that good deeds will be done and come out. And if so, now we understand Shaul HaMelech's question. How can I kill the whole nation of Amalek? How can I kill all of these people, men, women, and children? Is it not true that they're going, if I let them live, some good things will come from them? And another question, the children, Shaul said, of Amalek haven't done anything terrible. How can I kill them? There's no reason to say they deserve to be punished for their sins. So Shaul argued we should certainly be concerned from these children who have their whole lives in front of them. Certainly some good is going to come from them, and some good deeds will come from what they do during their lifetime. So that's what Shaul was pointing out when he made the case that there's seemingly something wrong with him wiping out the entire people of Amalek. Yotzis Abaskol, next paragraph, a heavenly voice came out, V'amrulo, and said to him, Al tehi tzadik harbe, don't be such an overly righteous person. Lachshov al hamasim tovim sheyosu heim, to focus on the good deeds that these Amalekites might do. Aval kisha omar ledoe, but then you're being so overly righteous about the good deeds that the Amalekites might do, but then later on you turned around and you said to your advisor, Doeg sheyaharu kohanei Hashem. You told him to wipe out the Kohanim of Hashem, the priestly city of Nov, incredibly righteous people. Az lo choshev haperos asidim lotzeis mehem. And then Shaul, you didn't take into account all of the peros, the mitzvos and the masim tovim, the good deeds that the Kohanim were doing already and would continue doing. Afim hayu hagedolim chayovim misa min adin. Even if you want to claim, Shaul, that as the king you viewed the adults of the city of Nov as being part of a rebellion or helping David rebel against you, and even though you had the right to rule that they might be subject to the death penalty, v'lachein amar lo al tirsha harbe, and therefore the heavenly voice said, don't be overly wicked. Dahainu shechota af b'shvichas domim atzmo. You committed a sin of murder against these people. Shahari lo hayadinum lamus. It was not accurate that they should be subject to the death penalty. Sha'af imachimelechota. Even if you want to say the head of the king of this, the head Kohen of the city of Ir Nov, who helped David out and gave him a sword and gave him food, even if you want to say that was a sin, what did all the other people who lived in the city do? V'hanoshim v'ha'olel v'yonek, and the women and the children and the nursing babies. V'od, and in addition, hayulo lochush leperos asidim latzeis mehem. Not only should Shaul HaMelech have been concerned about killing these people when it was not justified under the law, what about the fact of all of the good deeds that they were going to do in the future had they not been slaughtered? And certainly Achimelech, who is a very righteous individual, should not have been harmed because he did not do anything wrong in actuality, even though Shaul suspected him and ultimately had him killed for doing something wrong and his support of David. So what we see in this piece is that the Zera Shimshon, first of all, ties together by bringing in at the start this very unusual Gemara in Maseches Yoma that tells us that Shaul was questioning the mitzvah to wipe out Amalek based on the episode in the Torah of the Egla Arufa, of the mitzvah and the ceremony of Egla Arufa. And we see in this piece, Zera Shimshon has now explained to us what it is that Shaul was really arguing and what it is he was saying. And then the Zera Shimshon wrapped up by telling us why the heavenly voice came out and rejected Shaul's arguments and said, Shaul, your arguments are not valid. You're arguing about things which make it seem that you're so totally focused on good deeds that can come from the people of Amalek, but you yourself, Shaul, will see that even when it comes to truly righteous people, the inhabitants of the city of Nov, the Kohanim who lived there and their families, who truly were doing righteous actions, the mitzvos and masim tovim, there suddenly your logic you didn't apply it, and you had those people wiped out. So don't talk about how to treat Amalek when you yourself are going to wipe out the Jewish people of Nov and that will be against the din, against the actual law that should have been followed in that case. Yeah, Shakok for joining in the learning in Zera Shimshon this week. We look forward, God willing, to learning again together in the Zera Shimshon next week.